Hello. Today we're going to be reading Fancy Nancy by Jane O'Connor and illustrated by Robin Preiss Glasser. So let's open this up. Fancy Nancy. All right. I love being fancy. My favorite color is fuchsia, which is a fancy way of saying purple. I like to write my name with a pen that has a plume. That's a fancy way of saying feather. And I can't wait to learn French because everything in French sounds fancy. So what does Fancy Nancy like to be? Nobody in my family is fancy at all. They never even ask for sprinkles. There's a lot they don't understand. Lace-trimmed socks do help me play soccer better. Sandwiches definitely taste better when you stick in frilly toothpicks. And a princess is supposed to keep her tiara on. What's a fancy girl to do? I ask my doll. Maribel. Her full name is Maribel Lavinia Chandelier. Then I get an idea that is stupendous. That's a fancy word for great. Maybe I can teach my family how to be fancy. I make an ad and stick it on the fridge. And here we see on the ad it says, "Learn to be fancy with lessons from Nancy. Start today. Easy, fun, free." Soon there's a knock on the door. My family saw the ad. They want to get started right away. So what is Fancy Nancy's plan to make her family fancy? Here we see her teaching them how to be fancy. Instead of saying yellow, you should say gold. Instead of leather, you should say patent leather. And instead of glasses, you should say sunglasses. The trouble is, my family doesn't own any fancy clothes. That's okay. What is that fancy word? Oh yes, some accessories. Ooh la la, my family is posh. That's a fancy word for fancy. My mom twirls in front of the mirror. Why don't we go somewhere fancy tonight? How about dinner at the King's Crown, Dad suggests. Wow, my parents are acting fancier already. You can see they're all dressed up now. They're all fancy. May I escort you lovely ladies outside? The limousine is waiting. My dad is our chauffeur. That's a fancy word for driver. When we arrive at the King's Crown, everyone looks up. They probably think we're movie stars. I'm so proud of my whole family. They eat with their pinkies up and call each other darling. Here we see her little sister calling her darling. For dessert, let's have parfaits, my mom says. That's a French word for ice cream sundaes. Amazing! My mother knows French! When our parfaits are ready, I curtsy and say, merci. I carry the tray like a fancy waiter. Oops, I trip, I slip. The tray does a double flip. I don't feel fancy anymore. I want to go home. Why does Nancy want to go home? After I get all cleaned up, I put on my dressing gown. Those are fancy words for bathrobe. I feel much better. I'm ready for a parfait. I tell my parents, thank you for being fancy tonight. I love you, my dad says. I love you, my mom says. And all I say back is, I love you. Because there isn't a fancy or better way of saying that. The end. So now that we've read this book, I want you to draw a picture of yourself in the fanciest clothes you can imagine.